Hey everybody, welcome to Drive-Thru Review 679. Today we're going to talk about Necromunda Dark Uprising. This is a new box that's just come out from Games Workshop. And speaking of box, it is apparently their biggest box with the most stuff that they've ever released. And it's actually a little bit more than twice as thick as the Necromunda Underhive box that came out a few years ago. And it's sort of a reinvigoration or a follow-up to Necromunda Underhive. Everything in that initial offering is compatible with what's in here. If you've got any of the gangs and warbands that they've released over the last couple of years, or the campaign books or updated rule books, that's all going to be 100% compatible with what comes in this box. Now, I thought about doing sort of a multi-video sort of thing about this because there's a lot to really cover, but some of the stuff, it kind of pans out, it's not really worth kind of its own video. So I will have a lot of timestamps in the video description. So if you get kind of sick of me talking about terrain, you can go ahead and skip to the next section or whatever section you feel is relevant. So I'm going to talk about the terrain. I'm going to talk about painting the terrain. I'm going to talk about how I painted the different gangs that come with this, the Palinites and the Corpse Grinder cults. I'll talk in some detail about kind of the play style of each of those. And then I'll talk a little bit generally about kind of the general rules if you're not familiar with Necromunda and how how turn works and that kind of stuff. I'll talk about like kind of the larger Necromunda ecosystem through all of this and do kind of a review at the end of it and all that kind of stuff. So there'll be timestamps if you want to jump to certain sections that you find are more relevant, but I figured let me just pack it all in one video and then people can come revisit it if they need to at a later time. So it might be a little long, but there will be timestamps. So first off, I'm going to jump into talking about the terrain, then we'll move into the gangs and then kind of a little bit of play session and then some larger Necromunda concepts and then the review. So let's first jump into a lot of what you're getting in this box is 95%, not quite that much, but it's a lot of terrain that you're getting in this box. Okay, before we get into the terrain specific in the Dark Uprising box, I wanted to make a quick mention of some of the Underhive stuff this is compatible with. So you have these 1 foot by 1 foot squares that are in the Underhive box, as well as some extra packs that you could get afterwards. And these fit perfectly with the terrain that's going to exist in the Dark Uprising box. And the Dark Uprising box even comes with very similar looking terrain, and this is sort of a vinyl paper type of thing, and you can see it's double-sided here. It's got kind of a glowy alert red side on that side and then sort of a dead not much lighting happening on this side. So this pretty much lines up with those tiles that you get in that original box. So if you want to make use of that and you have some of those extra packs with that original box, you definitely can. And there's some other terrain pieces that you can get, which I'll talk about in a minute. This is not part of the box, but it's 100% compatible and actually fits seamlessly with basically like the rest of their line of 40K related terrain. So let's talk about a couple of things regarding the terrain. So here's a couple of the main pieces that you're going to be dealing with. You got these wall pieces here, and then you have these larger kind of vent type of pieces. Now the rules tell you to stick these right on top of those vents, and that's where they should go. I don't think that really absolutely matters, but that's just gives you kind of a general guideline of where you can kind of place them around the table as you have it. And you can notice that this is actually a 2 foot by 2 foot play area. And you might think that's a little bit small. There's not enough room to maneuver, but with the amount of stuff you actually get in this box, and then you could theoretically add on to it, it's more than enough. I played a couple of games on it and it works just fine. Now, one thing to notice about these is these top pieces here pop out, so you can actually stick stuff in them. So for example, I have this little piece here, like so, and this is similar to this sort of vent piece there. This will pop out. Let me just try to do it here, like that. So that'll pop out like so. And this has these little teeth here on the bottom, and you just kind of wedge that in. So then you can start to build up and make, walkways and build up several levels of terrain if you want. You could have a kind of a more spread out type of terrain and just have like one floor, so to speak, with, tunnels and walkways and hallways and all that kind of stuff, where you could build kind of a central piece and build it up. Now it's got some other cool stuff like these doors here. Like that. So if we stick this in between there, you can see, hey, you've got this like door that you can actually operate and open. And so this is pretty neat because in the Underhive box, they had this similar concept, but everything was kind of 2D. There was no three-dimensionality in terms of the terrain. Everything was like, it's like basically like playing a board game. So you had two modes. You had Zone Mortalis, which is what this is called, and then you had the Sector Mechanicus, which is where you'd have big stuff like this, and you'd stack it up and so you'd be moving around this and climbing up ladders and all that kind of stuff. And so what this kind of does is marries those two together in a way, but you're still effectively playing you can, if you want, play a Zone Mortalis game that's very flat and lots of corridors and hallways and doors and things like that, but it looks a little bit better on the table. Now, speaking of which, there is a sprue that is identical to one of the sprues that comes in the Underhive box, and this has these little like makeshift barricades and things like that. So you've got some of these that you can use, and then if you've got the Underhive, of course, they're compatible. There's a couple of these pipes and stuff like that. So you've got this one here. I painted these all kind of a little bit different. It comes with those three there, and you've got little like pieces of pipes and stuff like that too. I forget what box these are originally in, but I know there's another terrain piece that's a lot of these different pipes that you can get. Now, I did paint all of these with contrast paint. Now, all of the terrain is painted with contrast. So I did that in a couple of different ways. I sprayed it either with the Gray Seer base paint or with the silvery lead belcher spray. Now, all of these top pieces I sprayed with the lead belcher and then went over the top of it with contrast. So you can see it gives you kind of a rusty metallic look. Like I just painted some Blood Angel red on top of that, and that's on top of silver. So it kind of changes the color a little bit. And this is some Agoros Dunes there, which I've then kind of like muddied up with a little bit of the Typhus Corrosion, just lightly sprinkled around through the tops there. But like on the walls here, this was all sprayed with Gray Seer, and then I'd go back over it with like in the Necron compound or something like that, a little dry brush silver on top of there. So this is just, I believe that's Ultramarine Blue on top of that, or Talisar Blue, kind of thinned down over that silver to kind of give you a little bit of a screen look. And then over this I would do some thinned out Black Templar or Basilicanum Gray on top of that. On all the wall pieces here, you can see this kind of central piece to make it look dirty. This is thinned out Skeleton Horde on top of that, and the same with the walls, these little middle pieces here, like so. So just kind of break up the colors a little bit. And then the same as well on these gangplanks there. This is just the Skeleton Horde, just kind of make it look like dirt or mud. And then, you know, go back over these with silver, paint it with some Stormhost silver in certain spots just to kind of catch some of the metal. And then one kind of fun thing I did here, I didn't want to go too crazy with it because I try to keep, you know, different sort of schemes across different types of pieces. So this one here, this was just spray painted with the lead belcher hit with the Black Templar, but then I have that Martian Iron Crust sort of sprinkled on there, that kind of orangey color you can see on that to kind of give it a little bit of a rusty feel. I feel like I could have hit the whole all the terrain with that, but I didn't. I just did it on the stairs. I did scrape some of that on the top of these as well, along with the Typhus Corrosion. Typhus Corrosion is like a technical paint. You can see kind of a better example here on the bottom. So this is kind of like dirt, that kind of dark brown you can see on the bottom. It actually has a little bit of a texture there. So did that along like some of the walls and stuff, so you could just kind of get like just splashed mud and so on. You know, tried to paint this very quickly. I don't get super meticulous and detailed with definitely my terrain, because I want to get it, you know, looking nice, get it into the table, and then being able to play with it and kind of create the vision of the table that way, but do it quickly. And finally, just to kind of give you a little bit more of a detailed visual sense, like this little contraption here, this was hit with that lead belcher spray. It's very metallic silver spray. You can kind of see it on these, which come out and they're removable here. So that's the kind of the silver that it looks like. But then you just hit it with some Agoros Dunes thinned out, and then it just transforms the contrast, having that metallic undercoat, into kind of just various different kinds of rusts and metallic looking things. And then you can hit it with some dry brushing on the back side there, like here's some Necron compound dry brushed on top of it. And you know, if I wanted to brighten up that silver, I could use Stormhost silver, be more pronounced, you know, paint it on with a brush instead of dry brushing it. But it's just kind of a nice way to get kind of grimy, grungy, Necromunda looking terrain pieces done pretty quickly. And it kind of matches sort of the colors here on the board. So that's kind of a brief overview of how I approached the painting of it. Again, trying to be quick. Now let me set up everything that you get in the box, and so you can see how much actually sort of gets covered by the table in this 2 foot by 2 foot area. A lot of times I've actually a hard time using all the pieces because I sort of run out of space. So let me set it up here. Okay, so you can see the table's pretty full there. There's multiple levels and all that kind of stuff. Now I didn't use everything. thing. I had a hard time trying to figure out where to stick this double door that made any kind of sense. So there's still a double door. Now these are pretty cool because they have these like little control panels there you can access, and then these slide out and open. So similar to playing, you know, on the old Zone Mortalis where you had the doors. Now you've got these better 3D doors there. The tops of some of those vents are of course not used. And then you've got this little like tentacle coming out of a grate or something. I didn't use that. And a couple of these things which are removable, a couple ladders and the little traps there. So just a couple of real neat things about this terrain. I know I'm going on a little bit about it. This is the coolest thing in the world here, these things. So these little elevators are really cool. So you can like use the controls in the game, like take an action to use that and then just have it move down to the bottom. And then you can go ahead and put your figure on it, let's say, right? And then you could use another action theoretically to, you know, move it up. And then maybe that would be, you know, your actions for the turn. And then now you could walk around and move around up here. That is just the neatest thing. You could have this little like controllable elevator thing. You could make rules around it. You know, if you read the rules of the game, usually there's an attacker and a defender, and the defender has access to like opening doors. They can do whatever they want. The attacker has to, you know, do an intelligence check to try to like hack the door or knock the door down with a strength check and so on. So that kind of thing is neat. So you can do the similar kind of thing with this here. The other neat thing is these little railings here. These kind of come off here. You can just clip them off and then put them on as you want to make the terrain more or less dangerous. These stairs are neat because, let's see if I can detach it there, like so. So you can see I have it kind of coming in from the side there. So I can do a staircase that kind of goes around a corner, or I can stick it, you know, like this there. So you've just got one long staircase, which if we move this little pipe there, you can see I just did that going up to that upper level there. And everything kind of fits in perfectly. The elevations all work together. You can plug and play and interact with this as you want, because, you know, I just glued together several of these little walkways here. And so now I can take and then move this, you know, wherever I want. I've got different sized pieces. These little teeth here, these little tongues, will fit into the other sides of the other different, you know, walkways. So they kind of fit together easily. You can sort of keep them together a little bit with these railings, with the clips, which I'll try to show you there. So you can kind of see those little teeth there, those little clips. So those will just snap right in and they hold in place just fine. So you can see you start to create this real intricate kind of walkways, and it's this real cool environment for, you know, your gangs to participate in. But now let's take a look at sort of, this is an add-on. So that's everything. This is everything that you get, you know, in the box itself, which is a ton of stuff. It's so much terrain. You can interchange it. You could stack stuff up really high, like I was saying, build just a big central tower and do something like that. You know, connect these staircases together. You know, you've got these little ladder pieces and so on, and little elevators and so on. So there's a lot of stuff to, you know, make elevation an easy part of the game. But let's mix in some other terrain that you might have if you've been playing Necromunda for a while, or if you've been playing like Kill Team or something like that. You can do something really neat, you know, with all this terrain. Okay, so this is just something I kind of whipped up real quick here. Now you've got the Sector Mechanicus terrain in here, these gangplanks and walkways, these big cylinders here with all going all the way up there, just to be crazy about it. You've also got these little ruin pieces that seem to match up pretty well. So like if you look over in the corner there, you've got that ruin piece with the Zone Mortalis stuff and then the Mechanicus stuff all dusted up there. And you can see here the ladders to these gangplanks that go all the way around down here, all the way over here, and then over to here, where we can see we have our little elevator there. Now underneath here, you can kind of see there's a stairway over there that leads up to that one. If we move over, you can see we've got a similar elevator here, but then it leads up into a stairway which wraps around and then gets right to that same height of that walkway that's kind of going around there. So you've got kind of these two entry points there to this sort of, you know, high vantage point like that. So all this terrain, you know, mixes up and mix and matches pretty well there. So you can have a lot of fun. Honestly, I've had a lot of fun just kind of playing around and mixing stuff around, trying to make like the most unplayable board that looks neat, but you're like, how do I move my little guy, you know, underneath there and without knocking the whole table over? So there's definitely a balancing act to that part of it. But yeah, so that's kind of it for the terrain. Now let's move into some of the models and stuff. Okay, so here is not all the models that you get in the game. This is 1,000 credit gang on each side. So a lot of times with Games Workshop products, and frankly a lot of companies' products, when you get a gang or something in a starter box or whatever, you get like barely, you know, the minimum playable amount and so on. So here is 1,000 points or 1,000 credits worth of Corpse Grinder Cults. Well, in addition to that, you get all of these extra figures right here. So you've got a whole, you know, mess of figures that you can sort of mix and match and play around with the loadouts and what guns they have and all that. Oops. And then for the Palanites, you get these extra figures here, so you can kind of mix and match. So these are just the kind of the 1,000 point teams that I've been playing with in the couple of games that I've played with the new stuff. So let's first talk about the paint job just a little bit. Again, all contrast. Sprayed these all with Gray Seer. I went through and touched up some of this stuff with silver, anything that I felt was like metallic, like a gun, or these guys is these little masks. These are called initiate masks there. And then I'd go back over it with the Griff Charger Gray on some of these silver parts. But a lot of times here you can see this was the Space Wolves Gray on the Subjugators, these big fellows with the shields, and then on the Enforcers, the smaller fellows here, this is the Ultramarine Blue, which seems to work pretty well with the Nazdrag Yellow and stuff like that. So one interesting thing I did with these was on all the spots that were going to be yellow, I primed it Gray Seer, but then I took the Wraithbone base and then painted that over before I did the yellow bits, and then I traced back in the blue bits there on the stripes. But anything that needed to be like lighter like that, I'd go back in any of these yellow bits. So like the shoulder here, the part of the shield, go back in with the Wraithbone on top of the Gray Seer, and the yellow comes out a little bit better there. But yeah, same idea here. So like I went over his shoulders here. You can see they're kind of metallic red, or let's do a better one here. This guy, like these chest pieces, or even these I forget what they're called, these different blades that they can get. Those I went over with the Stormhost Silver, then went back over the top of it with a contrast color. So here, the Flesh Terror Red in this case, to make it sort of a metallic-y red type of armor there. And then this one I went over with the, this is the Griff Hound Orange. I think it's Griff Charger Orange or Griff Hound Orange there. So that makes it like a nice kind of a rust color there. And then for, the Corpse Grinders, this different skins, I always try to like do different skin colors, or some others there. Like this guy here's a different one. And so you can see the Wildwood I like for darker skin, and then I either do Fire Slayer Flash or Dark Oath Flash or whatever. And then also if I want to do like kind of gray, sort of dusty, almost like ashy flesh, I just use the Apothecary White, which is really a gray there and stuff like that. But yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. You can kind of play around with your own colors, but it's just a hit with the Gray Seer and then mostly contrast, and then you got Skeleton Horde and Snakebite Leather for like the pouches and all that kind of fun stuff. But yeah, that's kind of the gist of painting it. Now let's talk about the Corpse Cult. So the Corpse Cult, in terms of gameplay, the most interesting thing about them is all these different masks that they have. And this is going to add a +1 to their save on all these different masks. And all of these big fellas, it's going to have, I figure it's like terrifying or something, where if somebody's going to attack them, they have to take a willpower check to see if they're not super scared. And, if they fail the willpower check, then they'll fail the attack. Now, the initiates here, they don't have that terrifying ability, but they all have the infiltrate, all these small guys here, so they can come on the board after deployment. So they just have like a built-in infiltrate, which is usually like a trait you have to give, to your specialist and so on. But these guys are very much a close combat type of thing. They have a lot of them are going to be dual wielding these kind of blades here. Like I even made, let's see, this guy, this initiate here, dual wielding this bone sword there, and then he's got the cleaver saw. I can't remember what it's called. And then like this guy here has the Flenser maniac thing that just chops up people. So they want to get in close combat, get the dual wielding thing going of the melee, and then charge in, give one of them berserk or something, so they start just adding up dice on their charge attacks and so on. So that's generally what these folks are doing. The only guys with really range are these auto pistols here on their initiates. So these are like get up and close and fight close. So similar to kind of the first starter set, because you had the Goliaths. Oh shoot, I'm forgetting the other team, what they're called. So there was more of like a get up brute force, get in your face combat, and then there was a little bit more of a finesse side. I would say this is more of a brute force get up in your face, but probably a little better performing, I'd say, out of the box, let's say. So let's look at the Palanites, and these guys are basically like the Space Marines of Necromunda in a way. I don't want to like put anybody off by that, but they do some interesting stuff. So for example, you've got these big tanky fellas here with these shields. And so if you play like Space Marines, I play a lot of Death Watch, so you can get the storm shield and stuff like that. And so the interesting thing about this, which is a really cool thing about Necromunda, is facing is important. So if you come up behind them, and they're facing the other way there, then the shields are going to do no good. So that's a pretty cool little wrinkle on some of the gameplay though. So if you hit them in the front, then they can use these shields here to add to their saves, but they can also use these shields in close combat as well, which is a kind of a cool thing. And they just have these kind of cheapy stub guns though. So these guys aren't like super powerful in terms of the offense, but they are definitely, they're like a tank, and that's kind of a neat thing. So it's very clearly a tank role that you can sort of try to exploit there, and sort of get in the way of some of these crazy folks here that are going to try to get at your softer targets there. And so these guys here are very much like Space Marine scouts. I mean, they really are just maybe like a step below. You've got a sniper guy here. Here's sort of the sergeant or the captain when he's got a shotgun, stub gun here. This guy's even got a bolt gun there, and the bolt guns can be pretty effective in Necromunda here. So this is almost like a Space Marine light team, which is kind of cool because they theoretically work for the Imperium, but they're sort of like the somewhat corrupt police of the Necromunda, of the Hive City. But there's a real cool, interesting dynamic here, like I said, with the tanking and then kind of your ranged fighting and giving these guys, maybe some marksmanship or some sneaking and that kind of stuff to get through the different missions. So let's kind of go over the rules, and this I think is a definite improvement over what was packaged in Underhive. Now this is going to give you, of course, loadouts and for your teams, for your Palanites, from your corpse grinder cults. It's going to teach you the basics of playing a game. It also comes with a lot of sort of campaign type of stuff, which is where Necromunda really shines. Where is with the original box, you get the box, and then you get the Gang War book, and that had some campaign stuff in it. And then they slowly kind of trickled stuff out over the next year or two. So sort of getting at, what I think most folks really want out of this game is going to be right in here to get-go. So if you're going to get this as like a starting box to get into Necromunda, you've got all the terrain, which I've showed you, you've got all the models, and you've got extra models to sort of tinker with and add new members as your gang gets better. And then you've also got enough of a campaign in here to, I think, last you several plays. Now there's a wealth of campaign books and stuff like that if you get really stuck into it that you can get into that's going to expound on some of the cult stuff. There's a new one here. This is the Book of Ruin. It's got a couple other different cults besides the Corpse Grinder cults, like Gene Stealer cults and Chaos cults and stuff like that. And it beefs up a lot of what is in the campaign here. So if you want to kind of continue the campaign directly, you can get this. Now to do more of the Palanite stuff, there was a book, because the Palanites aren't actually new, there's a Book of Judgment here. And so you can do some stuff that's more more campaign stuff based around that team as well. So you can, if you want to keep going, then you can get these. And there's some other campaign books as well. But let's just take a quick dive into here. And they give you all the basic rules, and I found the rules very easy to read. These are exactly like you'll get if you get the hardback Necromunda rulebook. This is the exact same kind of basic rules that are covered in all of those things here. So you're going to get all of that. That's a few pages. So we're looking at, let's take a look here. So that is about 30 pages of rules, and that's just rules, no campaign stuff, none of the extra kind of before and after game stuff. This is just to go in and play a game, just to get through the tactics of it. Now afterwards, like I said, you've got the campaign. It tells you how to build your team, how to buy, you know, with the money that you get, everybody gets 1,000 credits to start. And then you have some other things like you get starting territories, if depending on how you're doing the campaign, injuries, experience, all that stuff that'll happen after the campaign, and a way to kind of guide you through playing like a 6-game or so campaign, or even more. It doesn't really matter, but that's kind of like your intro thing. And then a bunch of scenarios and stuff like that. And then as well as kind of all of the specifics. So you can see here's all the weapons and how much they cost and all that. So all of that is in here, which is cool, because it's, like I said, it'll get you in and you don't need to get anything else outside this box for a while, like several months or a year. You could play this again and again and really explore a ton of this stuff. And just while we're talking about rules, the game does come with these decks of cards here. You can see you have Uprising campaign territories. So you got the Precinct Fortress, which is where the Palanite police will start off, and then you have the Chaos Vein, so the Corpse Grinder will start that. But then you can start to add, you know, territories, and this will give you handy card references, because it'll help you with some of the stuff you can do before and after your game. And then in the course of the game, you're going to have tactics cards. So there's a handful of cards for each of the different factions that you can use. You draw these randomly. The scenario will tell you how to use these, but you can draw them randomly or select them. And these are really cool part of the game, as they can give you these kind of big twists to kind of get out of jail free cards that are kind of like one use only, which are pretty cool. Now it also gives you a lot of these cards, which you can go and write on. There's a certain kind of pencil that you can write in here that's really easy to erase and rewrite on. I forget what it is. I don't usually use these cards. There's an app online. It's not a phone app, but it's called Yak Tribe, and they've got all this new stuff in here, and so you can print out these as cards, and they give you the stat lines here, the weapon skill, ballistic skill, strength, toughness, and you can see there's a lot of stats. It's almost like an RPG. You got movement, weapon skill, ballistic skill, strength, toughness, wounds, initiative, number of attacks in a melee, leadership, cool, willpower, intelligence, and then experience. And then here's maybe all the weapons. I think this must be the leader captain there. So he's got all those different weapons and stuff, and then all that stuff. So this is very easy to refer to there, and it prints it out like that. I will put a link to Yak Tribe. It's just an amazing resource for this game in terms of like building. You can even like run your campaign in the website, and the website is mobile friendly too, so it's pretty easy. Now, one interesting thing here is you have these player aids here, which are really good for running down the combat sequence and doing some of the, you know, the real detailed stuff, because their combat can get pretty crunchy and detailed. This is one of the most crunchy miniature skirmish games where there's going to be a lot of modifiers and things to check. I don't think it's too bad. I've played it several times, but once you get the hang of it, it's not bad. But as a new player, there's going to be kind of a lot. One thing that I always forget, even though I've played it several times, is what's on the player aids in the Underhive, and I wish they'd included these as well. I think these are available online though, but these are all the actions that you can take on your turn here. And you can see here, this is the gist of the game I'm getting to, is you can see that's a simple action, that's a basic action, that's a double action. And so there's all those kinds of actions. So like you might be moving, shooting, opening a door, trying to hack a door, reloading your weapon, picking up stuff, charging, you know, which is different than just normal moving, standing up, crawling, going through ducts, retreating. All of that stuff is all different types of actions. So on your turn, you get 2 actions. You can do simple actions, you can do basic actions, you can do double actions, which use up both of your actions. And that's all going to kind of depend, you know, on what kind of state your character's in. So normally you're ready and you're ready to activate like this, but if you get shot at and you get hit, then you're at least going to get pinned, and so you're going to be put sort of lying down face up like that. And then maybe you get like a flesh wound or a serious injury even, I should say, and then you're going to be, you know, face down. That means you're going to be prone, at which point then you're very susceptible to either bleeding out or, you know, having somebody come in and just, you know, instantly killing you with what's called a coup de grace action. It's like a free action. So there's a lot to kind of manage and maintain with all that stuff. And I'm not, since this video is going to be kind of long anyway, I'm not going to do a complete how to play. I will put a link down, another link, to a video by Gorilla Miniatures, who did a Let's Play. He did it from Necromunda Underhive. And he's got a ton of Necromunda videos. So if you just watch that Let's Play video and then go maybe take a look at some other battle reports, you get kind of the gist. And it's really snappy. Like there's a lot going on, but a lot of times you're just kind of like, you're moving and shooting, right? Or opening a door, or, you know, rolling or fighting close combat and stuff like that. This is not that complicated. Like you just kind of say, well, what would I do? I'll move, I'll shoot, I'll check line of sight, I'll see if he's in cover, that kind of stuff. And then there's just a bunch of modifiers, +1, -1 for the different modifiers. You figure it out and then you roll your dice. But in terms of like the overall play experience, I'll leave that to the review part. I'm going to cover that in the review, because this, like I said, it's very intricate, but it's also, it's got some caveats to it that I want to just, you know, if you're not familiar with Necromunda, you should be aware of, and how it's different than maybe some other skirmish game you may or may not have played. So let's kind of jump to the review, and I'll kind of skirt over some of those little rules details as I kind of talk about more about the play experience and do kind of more of a review. Okay, so that was an overview of kind of all the stuff that you get in this Dark Uprising box. Talked about the terrain, the models, the different new teams that you can get, and a little bit of the rules and kind of a general feel for what you get in this rule book, which was a little bit more of an upgrade, I guess you could say, from Underhive. So let's kind of walk through my 3 pillars of reviews, and then I'll get more into kind of the details of the gameplay here. So the first thing I like to do is talk about player count. Now, I've never played a game of Necromunda with more than 2 players. I know you can do like a 3 and a 4 player scenario. I've never had a chance to do that, so I can't really speak to the larger player count. It seems like it would be fun to like end a campaign or something, have like a big, you know, battle royale or whatever. Now, the next thing I like to usually talk about is playtime, and then what is this game like, and then kind of go from there. Playtime, a scenario can be pretty quick. Like you could be down and out within 15 or 20 minutes. Or you could have a scenario go on for, I don't know, 45 minutes maybe on the upper end. I couldn't really see most scenarios. Now, with all the different campaign books and stuff, there's a lot of scenarios and stuff. So maybe there's a scenario in there somewhere that I just haven't played that would take you like an hour or so. I don't super think so, but it's possible. Most scenarios are going to take you about half hour or so. You know, you can sort of like bottle out in this case. So what happens is once one of your fighters goes down with a serious injury or just gets straight knocked out of action, then you start having to roll for bottle tests. And what that is you roll and you add your roll to the number of fighters that are out or down, and then if you exceed the number of fighters that are left, then you start to have to roll for their cool ability, their sort of, did they keep their wits around, or their morale ability, like you could say. And then you start to roll, and then if you fail that roll for them, then they start just fleeing and running off the battlefield. So it's definitely possible that you could have, you know, a couple lucky shots, maybe 2 guys drop, and then you fail a bottle test, and then every round you have to start rolling to see if everybody runs away, and then have everybody just bail on you, and then that's the way it goes. Now, sometimes that's not a bad thing, because if you go down and go out of action, you're going to have to make injury rolls after the game for those folks, and those folks could die. So bottling out, or even choosing to bottle out and run away at a certain point, is a big part of the game. Now, that can be frustrating, because if you just sat down and set up all this terrain and you play a 15-minute game, and then your opponent either, you know, there's some bad luck and somebody has to bottle, or somebody chooses to bottle on purpose, and it's like, okay, now we're going into bookkeeping mode of figuring out, you know, who got experience and who roll for injuries, and then maybe use some of the credits you may have gotten to buy some equipment or hire a new fighter into your team. And so at that point, you're just doing a lot of bookkeeping. But I find that part of it, you know, to be pretty fun. It's not my favorite. My favorite part is playing the game and shooting people. But so that's something you got to have to kind of know going in. And I don't really necessarily think, I mean, that's going to be a caveat for some folks for sure. You're just going to hear that and you're going to go, no thanks. And you're going to go on, you know, go and play a different kind of game. But to me, if that doesn't smell too bad for you, I would kind of lean into that, because if you know that going in, you can have terrain set up in such a way that it's easy just to kind of twist stuff around or just leave it and then play a different scenario on the same terrain, maybe switch sides on the table, or build up kind of a larger table and then kind of jump back and forth. One thing that we've done with my friends is we've had like 2 groups of 2 or even 3 groups, and then set up, tables and then just kind of rotate around the tables. And so, you're playing with new people and playing on trains. So you only set it up once. So it is conducive. I guess I should say that with player count. It is conducive to having a group there. You're only playing head to head, but you are playing, as a group, and then you can kind of rotate. So it's not that big of, if your game's over 15 minutes, we've done where we just take a chunk of an afternoon and play like 3 games, and that includes, the in-between game part. So you might have a bad game or a streak of bad luck, but within the larger context of the overall campaign, those short games are actually sometimes just as memorable as a game that maybe took the 45 minutes and it was like a knockdown, drag out fight with, last man standing and just, dead people everywhere, or people that are knocked out everywhere. But you got to know that going into the game. This is not sit down and play like a tournament game where you can know there's a solid 30-minute game here. All the sides are going to be perfectly balanced and all that kind of stuff. This is not for that kind of thing. So anyway, that's kind of my long-winded answer to playtime, because 15 to 45 minutes, plus you've got the in-between game stuff, so you really want to take a chunk of an afternoon and do that, and then play it as a campaign. And that's where, as a campaign, I should say, over multiple weeks and multiple days, or whatever you want to do. Think of it like a role-playing game, which is like a little bit more than a one-shot. You don't want to just do it once. I mean, you could over like a weekend or something maybe, but you could do it for a couple of weeks and then start over or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of ways to kind of approach the campaign. So that's playtime and player count actually kind of mixed together. So what is the game like, and what kind of sets this apart from some of those games? Well, if I did my top 50 videos, or top 50 favorite games of all time earlier in this year in 2019. And I had Kill Team up there somewhere, like it was in my top 20. Now, Kill Team is very different than Necromunda, even though they share the same company, same intellectual property. They're both in the 40K universe. They're sort of very different types of characters that are involved. The characters in Necromunda are more like you and I. They're humans, sort of, some of them. And, like you could kind of envision yourself in this role. Whereas you're playing Kill Team, it's like aliens and orcs, which are aliens, but, and space marines, which are not really humans and stuff like that. So it's more of like superhero Necromunda, right? It's all elevated stuff. And Kill Team is very much geared towards a quick set up and play, one game, one-off games, where this is not really set up to be that way. And then the other comparison, you could compare this to like any kind of skirmish game, but what sets this one apart again is the campaign aspect, the RPG stuff, the granularity of your gang, your war band, the amount of credits, the economy that they have. They got kind of like do jobs, and kind of the setting. This really, I mean, if you say Warhammer 40K is grimdark, to me, this is, I'm going on a little tangent here. This is actually more grimdark than 40K proper, in some ways, for me. Because in 40K, you have Space Marines and Chaos Marines, right? That's kind of the driving force, and these weird aliens, Necrons and Eldar and Orcs and all that stuff. And that's like theoretically scarier, I guess, in some ways, is those beings that, would just crush me like an ant, and it's just large, pervasive armies that are just like wiping out solar systems or whatever, in the space of a few weeks, and these 1,000-year-long wars and all that. So that's tricky, but that only becomes scary when I think of living in a hive city because these jerks are just having war over nothing, It's just like you think of yourself like as an orphan born into this, this world. There's a certain kind of extra level of sadness to me of rolling the dice with your birth and then being in a hive world. That's like, wow, okay. Like, you're not going to live very long, and then you're just going to be scraping for scraps and being hopefully satisfied with that. So anyway, there's an extra level of sadness. So to me, the grimness of it really comes through. So it's my weird kind of DNA brain. I kind of appreciate that more in terms of a setting to live in, because there's a certain level of I don't know if it's heroism or something, but there's something kind of inspiring about that, of being in this situation and still, trying to scrape by and still trying to survive and getting that will to live. Whereas if you're like some kind of elevated super being, like, not that special, you have all these superpowers, like, whatever, you should be doing well for yourself. Or you were born into some Imperium family or something that you had kind of the upper hand, like, whatever, your life is not rough. I mean, their life is still rough in 40K, but not compared to anybody born in Necromunda. So anyway, kind of a tangent there, but you really got to take a look at all of this in context, the setting, the campaign mode, the RPG stuff. Because Kill Team, you got a little campaign, you can do that. You've got Warcry, which is an Age of Sigmar thing, which is very much like a user-friendly get up and play. Like, that would be, if you've never played any game like this ever, Warcry, 100% recommend, go get it now, you've got it. This would be a tough recommend if you've never played a skirmish game like this. This is sort of your if Warcry is like the gateway game, or something, or Warhammer Underworld, Shadespire, Night Vault, and all that. If those are like your gateway games, this is like if you're thinking of train games, this is like your 18xx skirmish game. Whereas Ticket to Ride is sort of like Warcry or Underworlds. So you've got to kind of know that going into it and be prepared for that. Now, the other aspect of this is Necromunda really lends itself to kind of a game master or a dungeon master type of experience. And that's really how they have geared the larger sort of ecosystem of Necromunda. Like in this case, if you go and get Dark Uprising, you've got that, you've got all the terrain, you've got really a well-rounded war bands on each side, or gangs. You've got a campaign. You can play, you could play that campaign 2-3 times through with you and a buddy. Maybe taking turns being the Pal Knights versus the Corpse Grinder cults. You've got that. Like, you've got a rock solid foundation of an experience here in this box, and it's going to work great. I think it's going to work great. If you can lean into some of the stuff I've talked about, it's going to work great. Now, the larger system after this, if you wanted to get another gang, get into some of that, get some of these extra campaign books, that's where it starts to get really overwhelming, frankly, for me even. I expect for anybody, I'm not just saying for me even, it's like, holy cow, who would not be overwhelmed by all of this extra stuff in the campaign? And in all the campaigns, they have this figure called the Arbiter, which is your dungeon master, your game master. And that person basically is the one that was sort of designed to run the campaign and try to like maintain the balance and inject a little bit of their own sort of guidance in terms of the story. And it really is what the Game Master is for, is to sort of work with the players and guide the story along. Now, that player could play their own warband and just kind of play them along with everybody else. Or players could like collectively be the arbiter and sort of make decisions. There's some guidelines in all of these campaign books for that. But to me, what that really starts to lean into now is not a tactical, competitive, war game experience. This is more of a role-playing game where instead of you just being a character, you are now a gang, and you're kind of the de facto figurehead of that gang, the gang leader, and you're sending out, your troops, as you will, your gang members, to go and do things. And I think that's where this game is really going to excel at. And I wish I could speak more about it, because my particular group of gamer friends, really there's one other person that is down to play Necromunda or Kill Team or anything like that with me. The others have played with us, but it's really me and him. And so, but I really am very sort of curious and sort of excited by that possibility of one day sitting down and kind of playing through this campaign aspect. And I think that could really be where the game excels. And I want to be able to talk more about that. So if magically one day I get some time or something, and then, we're able to kind of do a campaign and really kind of chew into some of that arbiter role stuff, the dungeon master role stuff, that's going to be a good day, I think, because first I'll be privileged enough to have that time to do that, which would be good, because my life must be doing real well if I'm able to do that. But yeah, I'd like to come back and like talk about that and figure out that part out of it and see how well all that stuff really worked, because I've read through all these different campaign books, and they just give you a mass of tools. So if that's something that sounds interesting for you and your group, and you don't need a big group, I think, even 3, 4, 5, 6 people is all you really need. You don't need like a big league to do this. You can really get in and just have fun telling a storytelling experience. And that's kind of the last little kind of note I just want to kind of reinforce. Hopefully I've been talking about is this is not a competitive, skirmish tactical game. It has that in spades. Like the mechanics and all that stuff they really kind of bring you in a visceral way and suck you in, because like facing is important. Figuring out what your specialisms are going to be is very important. Like it's very granular, and there's just so many things you can kind of play with that are going to come into play. The scenarios are going to be so like wonky and crazy. You're going to be like, well, here's my 1,000 points of guys. Here's your 1,000 points of guys. You could take all of them. I only get to take 6 of them. Because you're going to randomly like determine who's getting done. And like in the scenarios, you're trying to escape, or you're trying to rescue somebody that was kidnapped, or you're going to go like plant a bomb or something at the other person's territory. So there's all these other kind of rules that are coming into play based on where you're fighting in the scenario and all that kind of stuff. Who's the attacker or defender? So those kind of setups are going to just put you back on your heels and make you kind of react in a way that feels very competitive. Like those get my competitive juices going. But a lot of times there's going to be stuff like that. It's just like, whoa, this is not going to be fair to me at all. So you have to kind of like roll with that punch and really kind of juggle both sides of your brain and lean into more of the narrative side of the experience, the campaign side, the role-playing side. But then it'll still kind of scratch that itch of that tactics and the positioning and all that fun war game stuff. So this is, I definitely, if all of that didn't like scare you away, this is 1,000% recommend in terms of Dark Uprising. The price is pretty high. I know this goes for $250 with like kind of your online discount, or like my local game store, they give you good discounts. I know that if you spend enough there, like $100, you get the 15% and all that. So I don't know what the MSRP is, but I've seen it around for $250. And so, but you got to realize you're getting good, well-rounded, gangs and war bands. So you're not just getting like the bare minimum. You're getting a boatload of terrain that you can easily augment with just maybe like one other purchase, in a few months. If you want to like kind of just like snazzy up your terrain a little bit and add some more elevations, you could probably get a less than $100 purchase to, bulk up your terrain stuff. And then, I think the other gangs are like $40. I don't remember, $40-50 each. And so, but you don't have to get all that right away. But what I'm saying is that $250 is a lot for sure. But I think it's worth it. You get a crap ton of terrain. Like you saw, even without adding the extra stuff, you are filling the board, and it's tough to like figure out how to use all of it. There's going to be something left over, and you get a fully fleshed out and chunky campaign that you can play tons of games with. So this is a good sort of entry point into Necromunda. I don't know if it's an entry level idea into Necromunda. The Underhive box, which is still available, is still probably a better entry level, because first of all, you won't have to assemble a crap ton of terrain and paint it. You'll have less models to do and stuff like that. So it's kind of, it depends on where you're at in your life. But I would say this is a recommend. If you really like, you could get into this and like just play this game like for 6 months. You know what I mean? You could really get stuck into that if you and a buddy got into it and shared it, or whoever. I think there's a reward at the end of that. I think for you. So anyway, that is the Dark Uprising box, the new one. Definitely take a look at it. Definitely recommend it. Thanks.